So I wanted to show you these watercolors that were given by Paul Rubens for me to review and compare to the watercolors that I use. So we'll open the box, and it has a list of the paints, mostly in Chinese. But when we look at the colors, I'm really excited to try this color. They're written in English and Chinese, so we can easily see what color they are. Let's see, what's another color I want to try? Sometimes purples are hard to find a nice color in. So we'll try that, and pinks are really hard too. So there are a few colors here that I'm excited to compare to the Winsor & Newton. So normally I use just a student grade Winsor & Newton Coatman watercolors. Most of the time my work goes onto the computer and is printed on products, so I don't worry too much about them being professional paints. But if I do a custom painting for someone who's going to have the original, then I do use Winsor & Newton professional grade watercolors. And so here I picked out some colors that are similar that I'd really like to compare with the Paul Rubens watercolors, like this turquoise. Here is the Coatman that I use, and here's the Paul Rubens. They look, the tags look a lot the same, so we'll see if the colors actually end up being that. Sometimes with watercolors, or with paints in general, it's not exactly the color of the tag when you put it on the paper. Here's another one of my Daniel Smith professional watercolors. That's a mauve that looks an awful lot like this violet. And here is my favorite pink. That's a Winsor & Newton professional, and I use that all the time. And they don't have one that's exactly that color, but we'll see if either one of these gets a little bit close. And these two look like they could make a good comparison. So the Winsor Blue and the Azure from Paul Rubens. And here is a purple that I like to use. It's nice and bright. They got the color right. And here is a purple. It won't be the same shade, but it will give us a good comparison for purple in watercolor paint. And maybe we can do a little mixing. Most of the time I just buy a few professional grade watercolors and do a lot of mixing. So I make sure I have a yellow and red and a good blue, and you know, you can get all your other colors from those. Here I wanted to show you a few of the colors that I use from my regular sets next to the colors from the Paul Rubens set, to see if we can find some that are similar, or to just find out that we have a bunch of different choices now. So I'm going to start with my three primary colors, the yellow, red, and blue that I use from Winsor & Newton. And so here is the Winsor Lemon. And they have a lemon too, but it's a little bit different shade. I think the Winsor is closer to their yellow light right here. And the Winsor Crimson is the red that I use. And when I bring it here to the reds, this is a beautiful red. When I bring it here to the reds, I think it matches mostly with their rose. And the Winsor Blue in the red shade, I think it's really close to the cobalt blue, but it's slightly its own thing too. So when I mixed these colors and I looked for translucency, I started with a solid color. So I took the color right out of the tube and I brushed it to the top here, and then I swished my brush a little in the water and I added some water and I swished it again and I added some more water and I swished it again and I added some more, trying to get more and more translucency. So you can see how the colors, the pigment goes through the water here. And you can see that the Paul Rubens has a good amount of pigment and still does a nice transparency here on this end. So this was the solid color, and then as I added more and more water, you can see on each one. Okay, so next is a Cotman color that I used, and it's a turquoise, and it also has a nice amount of pigment. This is one of my favorite turquoises, but when I bring it here to the Paul Rubens, here I have it covered up, you can see that it's a much different turquoise color than the Paul Rubens translucent turquoise. In fact, it almost is the same color as this azure blue. So it will belong somewhere in here. And I had this mauve, bright purple that I wanted to try, and they didn't have a color in this set that was exactly the same, but this violet comes as close as we can get. The mauve is still just a little bit brighter. And then my favorite permanent rose, favorite pink color. It will fit right between these two, I think. Closer to this one than this one. This one's more of a red. And this is the Daniel Smith magenta. It's not quite as purple as these and a little bit more purple than these, but you can compare the translucency as you see it on the charts there. And this is a Cotman sap green that I use. And you can see that Paul Rubens has a sap green too, but it's a much different shade. And actually I think the Cotman is a little bit more olive than their sap green, but not quite as olive as their olive green. So overall, they have a really good selection of beautiful, beautiful bright colors. And I'm looking forward to having especially some of these lighter colors that I mixed for sand on beach pictures, and especially some of these darker greens, because I spend a lot of time mixing and testing and mixing and testing to get some of these for pine trees or forests, or even just shadows in my leaves. Same with this May green. I mix a lot of the lighter colors too. Oh, and this Berlin blue. Oh, very beautiful. Okay, I think that gives you a good idea of the comparisons between some of the Winsor and Newton paints that I use, and professional and student grade, and you can see them here on the chart. Now I'll let you watch the colors on a painting. Let's take a closer look at the watercolor on the painting. Do you see how nice the colors blend in the sky when it's just one color? And if you can see on the background, even when there's multiple colors next to each other, they blend very nicely and they look very smooth. And then the lines where I used the calligraphy pen, they still look nice and sharp even after we use the water on top of them. This pink is nice and bright with lots of pigment. And the green is just the color I wanted for leaves on a palm tree. And that's it for the review. Maybe you want to try Paul Rubens watercolors too.